How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing the spark plug service on my friend's F90 M5. This car's got front mount intakes and a downpipe, so we're getting it ready for a stage 2 tune. If you guys want to see more of this car, I'll link his channel below, and I'll get right into the install. All right, so first step is getting all your crap out of the back of this F90. So if you're like him and you have all your life savings and all your life belongings in the back of the car, the first thing you're going to want to do is remove all of it. That way we can disconnect the battery. All right, so everything is cleared out in the trunk. I just removed the negative terminal from the battery and pushed it to the side, as well as the trunk liner. And I also tied a microfiber knot right here on the latch. That way, if the trunk closes, it doesn't latch. So with the battery disconnected, now we can head over to the front of the engine bay and get ready with the rest of the install of the new spark plugs. So everything back here is done, so we'll get right into the next part. All right, so now that we're in the engine bay, the first thing we're gonna do is remove the engine cover. So you have two covers for the DME right here, as well as this main engine cover, so these pop right out. So I'm gonna remove these first. Cover right there. Time for the turbos. Have you ever seen this without the engine cover? Yeah. Get this last cover. I already see it. You're missing a bolt. Yep. Unreal. So now we have the engine cover and the DME covers removed, and that'll give us access to removing the plugs for the DMEs. So you're going to want to take a photo of these colors and these cables just to ensure that you don't mix them up on reinstall. So you're going to have to remove both of these DMEs and the brackets to get them out of the way. All right, so now since the engine covers are removed, we're going to release the DME. So like I said, make sure your battery's disconnected and take photos of the wiring. That way you don't have it mixed up. They only go in one way, but it also helps just to have the photo. To remove these plugs, you're going to press down on this tab and just pull back on this lever, and they'll push out just like so. So I'm going to do this for the rest of the DME as well as that side, and then go from there. So now with the plugs out of the way, we're going to remove this plastic retainer clip. So there's just a few little clips you want to pry on. You can also use a pick tool, or you can push it with your fingers. So right here. All right, so to remove the DME cover, you have a couple of these little clips here. So you push them up, and with all these harnesses out of the way, you still have some cables attached, but now you have enough room to slide the DME out. So I'm gonna go take the DME out and then get these clips back here. All right, so with this cover out of the way, I was able to remove the first DME. So I just labeled it and put it to the side. So now that the DME is out, I'm going to remove the rest of the clips on the back to free this top cover off and have more room to take off the rest of the parts to get access to this side of the spark plugs. Now with the top of the DME cover removed, I removed the DME. So DME is here, the top of the cover is right here. So now we're just gonna have to pull this plug out, and you don't have to remove all these cables. I know it looks like a rat's nest here, but you're gonna wanna go around this back part and pull off this whole assembly here and put it to the side, and then we'll be able to remove the bottom DME tray, and that'll give us access to this bank of the spark plugs. So I'm gonna go ahead and start removing what I need to, and then I'll get back to you guys and explain further what needs to be removed. So as you can see, I have this section removed. So all you have to do is just press on this tab here and remove this plug right here. It wraps around, and you can hang this kind of over here for now. So now that that's out of the way, you can see I have just 3 bolts, one here, and then there should be one here as well as one down here to loosen this bottom part, and then we can pull out this bottom DME cover. But as for all this stuff, we can just kind of push it out of the way. Make sure you're not tugging on any wires. There is another clip right here that you want to remove. You just press it and pull it right up, and that will be released. So now that there's no wires attached to the bottom DME cover, I can remove those bolts and remove the lower DME cover, giving me access to this bank. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen those bolts now. Okay, so back here there was one 10mm bolt, as well as a bracket right here in the front, and I removed the bolt here, and that was a, I believe, let me double check, it was a T30. I put it on a wobble extension, so I removed these two, and now I'm going to be able to push these wires out of the way and remove the lower DME cover. So I'm going to remove this now, and then I'll have access to this side. Okay, so I removed the lower DME tray. As you can see, here's a better look at the bolt I was talking about. There's one 10mm bolt over here, and then down here, some people remove the full bracket, but I was able just to remove the T30 bolt that was holding the tray in. So I pushed the wires kind of over here carefully. You want to make sure you don't tug them or force them one way or another. So I was able to do that. So I just have these two bolts, the upper DME cover and the whole lower tray. So here's where the T30 screws into, and then the 10mm is on up top, and then I was able to pull this out. So now you can see your coil packs, and I'm going to have to probably remove this line right here or move it out of the way to gain access to the bolts, or just gain more access to the coil packs. So I'm going to update you guys as I move stuff out of the way and let you know what needs to be removed and start removing the coil packs. So I removed this whole assembly here that holds all these wires. To do so, you just want to remove the two T30s that hold this tank up here and pull straight up and just push out of the way. And then you can remove these two T30s that will be attached to this bracket right here. So now that these are removed, I put them back in just so I don't lose them. But now I can push this over, and as you can see, I have more access to the ignition coil packs. So to remove these, all you have to do is push up on this tab, and then the wire will automatically come out. And now you can pull out the coil packs. So like I was saying, I have these two bolts removed. I removed the bolt up top. Just put it back in. There's two, but one was missing on this car, so I pulled this aside. Was able to use a T30 to remove these two bolts to pull this harness out. And as you can see, I pulled the coil pack out of this cylinder, and now you can see the spark plug right down there. So I'm just gonna go around this bank and do the same process. Up here it gets a little tighter, so I'll let you know if we have to disconnect anything else. But I'm going to get these spark plugs removed and replaced. As you can see, it looks a little bit of a rat's nest here, but this is all just kind of swung over to the side. So now that we have more room, I'm going to get these spark plugs changed. So for this vehicle, we're going to be using NGK 97506 spark plugs. That's what is recommended, and it's also recommended that they're gapped at 0.022. So I'm going to use my feeler gauge as well as my spark plug gap tool to ensure that all of these are gapped as close as possible to 0.022. And once they're gapped, I'm going to make sure all of them are in spec, and then we can reinstall these new spark plugs. So these were supposed to be pre-gapped, but I highly recommend that you double check. So that's what I'm doing here. I have each spark plug in the tool, and I have it set to, it's hard to see, but 0.022. And I'm going to just ensure that every spark plug is gapped correctly, which this one is. If it's not, then you can just tighten this down while the feeler gauge is in here to ensure that each of these plugs have the correct gap before reinstallation. To remove the spark plugs, you're going to want a spark plug socket that is either magnetic or a 14mm that is a narrow wall or thin wall socket. That way you have enough clearance to make it into the, or to remove the actual spark plugs and install them. So I have this thin wall, and I'm going to put it on a wobble extension and remove the spark plugs. So I just went ahead with my socket and removed the first spark plug. As you can see, let me focus here, it is well past due. So the fresh spark plug is now ready to go in. I'm going to do them one at a time. So Now that this is removed, I'm going to just ensure that my gap on the new spark plug is correct. So I'm going to reinstall it and torque it to spec. So I'm going to do each one by one. That way I don't have any chance of things or debris falling into the cylinder head. So I'm going to go replace the spark plug now. You want to make sure you hand tighten these so you don't cross thread them in the cylinder. So I'm just going to very gently guide the spark plug in and just make sure I'm ever so slightly turning it and making sure there's no resistance. If you feel any resistance at this point, stop immediately and back out the spark plug and make sure you're not cross threading. So I'm going to let this fully seat hand tight, and then I'll pull out the torque wrench and torque these to spec, which I'll let you guys know what that specification is once I do it. Okay, so I just grabbed my torque wrench and set it to 23 Newton meters, which is the torque spec for the spark plugs. So I'm going to go ahead now and torque this to spec. As you can hear, it clicks, so it's torqued to spec. So now I'm going to pull this socket out. And now I'm going to install the ignition coil back onto that cylinder and move on to the next. So I'm going to go pull all these spark plugs out and replace them, and we'll get to the other bank. Okay, so jumping ahead, I only showed the install on this, but it's the same for these 4 cylinders. You just have to kind of maneuver yourself around. So I have all the spark plugs now installed. The only difference with these is that on this first bank, it's a little bit harder to see, and you want to pull up the opposite way as these, they pull up this way. So for this clip, to pull up that way. Now there's a lot of stuff in the way of the high pressure fuel pump and all these wires and harnesses. So I was lucky enough, I have smaller hands, and I was able to remove the clip by just kind of by feel and reinstall by feel. You might not be able to, so if you can't, then I would look around and see what you can remove. But in this case, I removed absolutely nothing. So all of these are torqued to spec, and the ignition coils are back in and plugged in. So now I just have to reinstall. So the reinstall is going to be the reverse of what I showed you guys to remove. It's not too difficult. It's just, piecing back things together. So I'm going to attach this clamp back on, or this harness back on with these 2 T30s, as well as the coolant expansion tank up here. And then everything else, the lower DME cover and the upper DME cover are going to go back in. The DME is going to go back in. All these plugs will be plugged in. So I'm kind of just going to briefly go through that, but just reinstall the way it came out. All right, so just to catch you guys up to speed, I know I wasn't going to film much of it, but I just reattached everything. It's the same as the removal process. So I had the lower DME tray in, and then I just made sure to put this top computer back in, put the DME in, plug in all the harnesses corresponding to the photo I took earlier, and did the top DME tray cover. So now this whole bank is torqued to spec, all the spark plugs are done. So now I did this passenger side first. I'm gonna go head on to the driver's side. So now that we're on the driver's side, same process. The first thing I'm going to do is start unhooking all of the DME clips on this side. So I have some cables here. I'm going to press down and pull these levers out. I'm also going to take a photo to memorize these connections. And then I'm going to remove the top DME tray cover and then the bottom DME. So I'll show you guys the specifics of that when I get to it. But as for now, I'm just going to remove these DME plugs. Now the upper DME. Okay, so I was able to remove all the wiring harnesses, and then I just pulled out the DME, same as the other side. So now the DME is removed, I'm going to remove the bolts to get the lower DME tray out. It's just like 3 bolts. I'll show you guys when I get it out, and then I'll have access to this bank. Appreciate you. And now I got the DME tray out. So I just removed the DME as well as the lower DME tray. The tray itself, apart from the wires that are removed, is just held on by 3 10mm. So you have 1 in the back and 2 on the side. Once you remove those, just make sure the harness is out of the way and you can pull this up and out. So now it still looks like a mess, obviously, but I have the DME tray out so you can see some of the ignition coils. Now I'm gonna have to remove these bolts and slide over the coolant reservoir. Hopefully that'll give me enough room to access this back part. So I'm gonna remove this, push it out of the way, and then I'll show you. So the coolant tank I'm leaving in. I just undid those 2 bolts and this clip right here for the sensor, and I popped it up and out of the way. You can see you can pull it up on these grommets. Here are the 2 T30s that are removed, so the harness is down, and now you can see 1, 2, 3 is under there, and the 4th one's tucked right here. So same process as the other ones. I'm gonna just pull these up and remove the spark plugs and replace them. So I'm not gonna really show too much because there's not much to see, but I'm gonna pop each ignition coil off and put the new spark plugs in. Okay, so it's a little hard to see, but just take my word for it. I put all the new spark plugs in, and the ignition coils are back in and plugged in and pushed down. So now I'm just going to reinstall this bracket. The coolant expansion tanks will come back down here. As you can see, my hands are destroyed, but I'm going to rewire the harness, or not rewire it, but put it back in place and tighten down the lower and upper DME holder, or wherever it sits. And that'll conclude this bank. Okay, so as you can see, I have everything back together. It's just the reverse process of the removal, so I didn't really film too much, but you really just have to fight with all these connectors and just make sure you have them all clipped into the DME the right way. So this is all clipped in, coolant reservoir's back in, everything's back in. And just double check, make sure your work, I mean, a lot of people are very confident, but you want to make sure that everything's plugged in, especially the DME, so make sure everything's clamped in, levered down. And now I'm just going to install the negative terminal back in the battery, and we'll be ready to start up for the first startup. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear me, but start it up and then let it idle, and that concludes the spark plug job. So start it all up. Spark plugs are installed, and that's it. So I hope this video was helpful, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the description below or the comment section below. I'll try to get back to you guys as soon as possible. So as you can see, now the F90 is all wrapped up. My friend actually took it home that night, so I don't have it in the garage anymore, but the car is flawless now that the spark plugs are installed. I would highly recommend doing it yourself. It's just a couple extra steps if you're used to working on these vehicles, so it wasn't too difficult as most people make it out to be, and it's definitely well worth doing it yourself and saving some money opposed to going to shops or the dealership. So now that the car's ready for stage 2, if you guys want to see more content, let me know in the comment section below, and I will try to, have some ideas for future videos of the F90 M5, because there's not too much content out there on those cars. So feel free to let me know. Overall, install was pretty easy. If you guys have any questions, as always, leave them in the comment section, and please drop a like if you liked the video. It really helps out a lot. Don't forget to subscribe too for more videos in the future, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.